Davenport native and American Pickers star Frank Fritz has died.
You are plus 40 years, chances are you get out are very slim to none, and you deserve that sentence. You understand that, right?
At this trial, defendant Michael Wolfe was convicted of murdering his friend, Frank Fritz. Immediately after the judge read the verdict, all eyes turned towards Mike Wolfe. He slowly blinked, then suddenly collapsed. When the medical team arrived, they discovered that Mike Wolfe had passed away. For over a decade, they had been the dynamic duo of the show, American Pickers traveling across the United States in search of rare antiques. However, behind the colorful scenes beneath the flashy exterior with witty jokes and visits to memory-filled treasure troves, there was intense competition, a quiet struggle for power that gradually escalated into an uncontrollable blaze. Was this a perfect crime, or had it been planned long ago? How did Mike Wolfe kill his close friend, Frank Fritz, so methodically? This is the story of how two friends reached the peak of fame only to end in tragedy. 1. Frank Fritz's death, a stroke, tragedy, or a murder plot. Frank Fritz's death was initially recognized as the tragic result of a severe stroke. Shocking news that, while heartbreaking, wasn't entirely surprising to his loyal fans. Frank had been absent from the show for several years, struggling with health issues, weight gain, and depression. His silence after leaving American Pickers was seen as an effort to heal emotional wounds. However, it turned out that what he was searching for was not healing. He seemed to be running away from something, or perhaps someone. When news of Frank's sudden death at his home spread, the public reacted immediately with deep sorrow. Tributes flooded social media, and Frank was remembered as the heart of the show, a rugged yet lovable man, the perfect contrast to Mike Wolfe's sweet-talking charm and appeal. However, about 6 weeks after the funeral, a quiet investigation began in Iowa. It started small when a medical examiner discovered poison in Frank's autopsy report. He had a lethal concentration of fentanyl in his system. This in itself wasn't unusual. Fentanyl is a powerful drug often prescribed to treat pain after a stroke. The issue, however, lay in the fact that Frank didn't have a prescription, no history of using the drug, and seemed to have no way of accessing it. Those closest to him revealed that Frank was actually afraid of drugs. These suspicious signs couldn't be ignored. Local authorities contacted the DEA and later the FBI. What began as a routine autopsy quickly escalated into a major investigation. They collected phone records, GPS data, emails, and recovered deleted text messages. Then one name repeatedly came up: Mike Wolfe. To the public, he was the face of the brand, a visionary businessman who had turned the art of picking antiques into an exciting venture. But behind the scenes, he had a very different reputation: controlling, calculating, obsessed with power and profit. Especially in the years after Frank left the show, the deeper they dug, the more bizarre things they uncovered. Mike Wolfe was accused of registering Frank Fritz's name as a trademark just weeks after Frank passed away. He secretly attempted to buy Frank's share of the production company through a third party. The most damning evidence was that he was spotted near Frank's house, caught on a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera on the night prosecutors believe fentanyl was being distributed. No one wanted to believe it. How could it be that Mike Wolfe, the charming face of American Pickers, could be accused of killing the man he once called a brother? It seemed unbelievable, but the evidence didn't lie. When the case went to trial, the courtroom became an unmissable reality show, a dark drama that the entire country watched, witnessing layer after layer of lies stripped away to reveal a horrifying truth. Not only had Mike Wolfe betrayed Frank and stolen his entire legacy, but he was also accused of coldly poisoning his best friend, and now a life sentence hung over his head. Frank's brutal death in front of the very legal system, the institution tasked with administering justice, closed a dark chapter. However, the story doesn't end with this shocking conclusion. It also covers all the events that led up to it. Before the murder, before the trial, there was a friendship, a partnership built in dusty warehouses and forgotten old car garages. So, what tore apart the seemingly solid friendship between Frank Fritz and Mike Wolfe? And how could Mike Wolfe bring himself to take the life of his best friend? First, let's take a look back at the journey that took these two close friends to the heights of fame. 2 golden days of American Picker. We will take a look back at the early days of American Pickers, when everything was still fresh and exciting, when the laughter felt genuine and the antiques told their own unique stories. In the early 2000s, long before reality TV shows about car races, cooking, or dating flooded the airwaves, Mike Wolfe had a vision, one that was unpretentious, unflashy, yet deeply authentic. Mike was not a television producer, not an actor, and certainly didn't have the backing of a big media empire. What he did have was an extraordinary perseverance and a deep passion for hunting down old items. His life had been intertwined with picking for nearly all of it, traveling across small towns, knocking on doors to ask if anyone wanted to sell old stuff. Sometimes he would find valuable items, but more often than not, he would come across things deemed to be useless. However, that never discouraged him. He always envisioned a show that could capture the thrill of the hunt, the excitement of bargaining, the appeal of new discoveries, along with the special connection between the item and its owner. Then Frank Fritz came into the picture. Frank was completely different from Mike in many ways. While Mike was lively, outgoing, and full of energy, Frank was quieter, more reserved. He was a more practical person with a love for vintage toys, oil cans, and old advertisements. He cared less about appearances and paid more attention to the small details. The two had known each other since high school, but their lives had diverged after that. Mike pursued picking full-time, while Frank worked in the fire department and safety inspections for many years before transitioning into the world of antiques. When Mike needed someone to help turn his dream into reality, Frank was the perfect choice, not because they were alike, but because they complemented each other so well. In 2009, after many years of chasing his dream, Mike finally got approval from the History Channel. The show was simply 2 men driving around the backroads of America in a truck searching for valuable old items, yet this simplicity created a strong appeal. The first season of American Pickers took off with an unexpected viewership, not only because of the love for antiques, but also because of the natural chemistry between the hosts. Mike's clever negotiation style and his ability to spot hidden value in items always helped him strike great deals, while Frank's deep knowledge of collectibles added authenticity to the show. However, American Pickers wasn't just about picking, it was also about people. Each episode featured moving stories from the characters, from elderly individuals sharing their past to couples proudly showing off family treasures, or eccentric collectors guiding the audience through mazes of historical artifacts. The stories were filled with laughter, tears, and memories being brought back to life. The show never mocked these people. On the contrary, it honored them, and this respect became a hallmark of the program. As American Pickers grew in popularity, Mike and Frank also became household names. They traveled across the country attending events, signing autographs for fans, and even opened their own stores based on their discoveries. Mike's antique archaeology stores in Iowa and Nashville became hotspots for fans of the show. But as with all successes, there was a price to pay. The balance in their partnership started to shift. Mike Wolfe gradually became the face of the brand. He became more comfortable with interviews, participated in more business activities, and began to hold more control behind the scenes. He became the executive producer handling brand deals and was the main negotiator for sales contracts and business opportunities. Slowly, the line between co-host and boss began to blur, and although Frank was still portrayed as an equal on-screen, he could feel the growing difference in their relationship. 3. Silent betrayal of power and greed. The insiders have begun to reveal the secrets behind the scenes where the simmering tension started and eventually grew into a full-blown conflict. According to multiple sources, Frank felt he was gradually being sidelined. His ideas were ignored, his contributions were overlooked, and his value was diminished. Some longtime crew members have stated that Mike gradually started behaving as if the show were his personal property, rather than a collaborative effort between the two. The issue was not just about personal egos, but also the power structure Mike owned, antique archaeology. Mike controlled the production company, and Mike had the final say in the content of the show. As the show entered its 10th season, viewers began to notice the change. Frank seemed quieter, and his screen time dramatically decreased. He no longer appeared frequently in commercials or interviews. Rumors about his health began to spread, followed by whispers of internal conflict. Although the show did not directly address these issues, the online community was buzzing with speculation. Then the announcement came that Frank would no longer be part of the show. The official reason given was that he needed rest for medical treatment after back surgery and needed time to recover. Vague and cautious statements were made with no specific commitments. Mike's reaction took everyone by surprise, as it was shockingly brief. Fans were expecting a heartfelt tribute, a recognition of their friendship and years of working together. But instead, it was conveyed in a few cold lines. Mike only posted a brief message on Instagram wishing Frank well, but the tone was distant and indifferent, as if the work was continuing without him. And indeed, the work continued. A new host appeared. Viewership dropped slightly, but the antique archaeology brand kept growing strong and selling products. Mike still participated in interviews while Frank disappeared from the public eye. However, the truth was that Frank was facing many issues behind the scenes. His friends revealed that he felt abandoned, not only by the show, but also by Mike. He felt he deserved better treatment. He wasn't just a co-host, but also a co-creator, at least in his own mind. He had spent many years dedicating himself to the show, building a loyal fan base, and now he felt pushed out. He began drinking again, avoided public events, showed signs of weight fluctuations, and his mood deteriorated. Eventually, he suffered a stroke which later led to his death. The reasons for their fallout remain a mystery. Some claim it was a matter of egos, others blame money, and some argue that there was a deeper betrayal that the audience would never know about. But no matter what the reason was, the friendship that created American Pickers had completely broken down. And when Frank passed away, Mike's actions only fueled suspicion. He didn't attend the funeral, didn't post any tributes, and even failed to mention Frank's passing for several days. What the public didn't know was that authorities had quietly launched an investigation. A toxicology report revealed that Frank had lethal levels of fentanyl in his system, a drug that was not prescribed. A series of questions arose. Who had been in contact with Frank? Who stood to benefit from his death? And exactly what was Mike Wolfe doing near Frank's house the night before he was found unconscious? Fame can come quickly, but maintaining it is a whole different story. For Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz, fame was like a runaway freight train out of control. As American Pickers became a major TV show with business at its core, the show's original purpose, the hunt for valuable antiques, slowly became secondary. Now everything revolved around contracts, profits, licensing deals, and intellectual property rights. In this world, Mike Wolfe thrived while Frank struggled to keep up. Everything changed from the smallest details, each person's screen time, the shift in storytelling style, the frequency of appearances in commercials, and the final say on what footage was used. Wolfe quietly consolidated his power. Hiring lawyers, agents, and PR experts, he began trademarking phrases from the show, protecting the antique archaeology brand, and expanding into side projects. Meanwhile, Frank just wanted a simple life, appearing on television and meeting fans. Close friends of both noticed the stark contrast in their conversations by season 6. A crew member recalled a filming day in Alabama during season 8. The crew visited an antique car lot owned by a man who had fought in the Korean War. Frank had connected with the man, chatting about gas station memorabilia, and they had a heartfelt conversation on camera. However, when the episode aired, that segment was cut out and replaced with scenes of Mike sealing deals. Frank was furious, feeling left out, and many insiders confirmed that he wasn't the only one who felt that way. Actors, crew members, shop owners, and experts noticed a pattern. Only footage that highlighted Wolfe was kept. Mike also wanted to be the hero in every story. Over time, this obsession affected the entire American Pickers brand. He trademarked familiar phrases from the show, protected the antique archaeology brand, and controlled all profits from merchandise. His social media pages were also managed by his team. Not the network, Mike hired private PR consultants to build his public image and required all interviews with the press to be approved beforehand. A former network executive revealed that Wolfe often used his fame to impose on others. He knew the network needed him and frequently threatened to leave if things didn't go his way. It's all smiles on the press. But behind closed doors, he's like a bulldozer. Frank Fritz, Mike's longtime co-host, had noticed the signs of trouble early on. Throughout the filming process, he began to show clear signs of disappointment. Frank would frequently leave the set in the middle of shoots after disagreements, and at times he would even refuse to promote the episodes, citing dissatisfaction with how he was being portrayed. He felt that Mike was being favored, becoming the only star while he was relegated to a supporting role. The production staff also noticed that there were no longer any of the joyful laughter between takes, moments that had previously been a reflection of their camaraderie and friendship. Everything slowly began to feel more tense, rigid, and scripted. Outside of filming, they rarely spoke to each other unless absolutely necessary. The drives in the truck, which had once been filled with jokes and chatter about small towns, now were marked by silence. Frank often drove his own vehicle while Mike stayed busy building his own empire. He began purchasing properties in Tennessee and Iowa, expanding his antique archaeology stores, and turning them into prominent tourist destinations. Visitors would line up for hours just to peek into Mike's office or snap a photo with the iconic truck. Best-selling items included t-shirts, mugs, posters, and even signed shovels. As time passed, Mike Wolfe seemed to become more than just a host. He had turned himself into a brand. He began enjoying personal projects. According to a former executive at the network, there were even internal discussions about launching a new show with Mike entirely without Frank. Although Mike denied these rumors, doubt began to creep in. Sources revealed that what hurt Frank the most wasn't just the fame disparity, but the chilling silence. Mike's quiet decision-making without consulting him, script changes without informing him, and meetings held without his knowledge. The sense that his voice no longer mattered became increasingly evident. The show, once a joint effort, now had only one person in control. Then health issues began to surface. Years of stress from constant travel and an unhealthy lifestyle had taken a toll on Frank's health. He had Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory bowel condition that made it difficult for him to move easily. On top of that, he had serious back problems and required surgery. When he temporarily stopped filming, everyone thought it was just a brief break to recover, but in the end, he never returned. The network announced that Frank was on medical leave for treatment. Fans sent thousands of well wishes, and every few weeks rumors circulated that he would come back. However, behind the scenes, the silence continued. Frank received no phone calls, and his name rarely came up in meetings. When he reached out to producers, the answers he got were vague. One day, a decision was made. He was out. His name no longer appeared in promotional materials, and his face was replaced with a new co-host. The show went on while Frank was left completely devastated. In an emotional interview later, Frank finally spoke out. He revealed that he hadn't spoken to Mike in 2 years and felt abandoned with no contact throughout his recovery. "I didn't quit the show," he said. "They were the ones who quit me." This statement shocked the fan community. How could the once close duo who had brought American Pickers to audiences for over a decade fall apart like this? Why had Mike stayed silent about Frank's departure? Frank's condition worsened. He fell into depression from feeling betrayed and abandoned. He rarely left his home, stopped responding to messages. His weight fluctuated and his health quickly declined. Then a sudden stroke hit. He was found unconscious at his home in Davenport, Iowa, by a neighbor taken to the hospital and admitted in serious condition. Initially, the incident seemed like a typical tragedy, an unfortunate medical emergency. A man in his 50s struggling with numerous health issues and stress, succumbing to a stroke. However, What the public didn't know, and would later become the subject of a major investigation, was that the hospital's toxicology report revealed something very concerning.
Frank Fritz tested positive for fentanyl, and not just a trace, but a dangerously high amount, a dose that could cause respiratory failure and death. Although Frank was not a street drug user, how had fentanyl ended up in his system? This question remained unanswered until Frank passed away. After the coroner's investigation, the questions grew clearer. The autopsy results showed that Frank had been exposed to synthetic fentanyl, which is 40 times more potent than heroin.
This drug wasn't prescribed to him, wasn't in his home, and it wasn't ingested. It had been injected into his body. According to family members, Frank was terrified of needles. His friends and loved ones all confirmed that he only took medication when necessary, but he never used injectable drugs. He was even apprehensive about flu shots. Therefore, the idea that he would willingly inject a deadly drug was inconceivable to his family. When a small injection mark was found on his thigh, it was no longer just an accident. It was murder. After searching his home, Mike Wolfe was arrested and quietly taken away, avoiding media attention on charges of first-degree murder and evidence tampering. The once charismatic face of the American Pickers host now appeared gaunt and weary with no smile, and everything seemed meaningless. The wrinkles around his eyes were even deeper. He denied all charges, claiming his innocence, asserting that the evidence was circumstantial. However, the court would soon make its final decision. 4. Fateful trial reveals the ultimate truth. When Frank passed away and the secrets surrounding fentanyl were uncovered, Mike Wolfe was arrested and the tense trial began. Prosecutors heavily relied on testimonies presented during the trial, arguing that Mike's desire for control had morphed into something pathological, causing him to see Frank not as a partner, but rather as a burden, an obstacle in his business that he wished to completely dominate. A clinical psychologist called as a witness by the prosecution analyzed Wolfe's behavior based on interviews, testimonies, and video footage that had been reviewed. The psychologist pointed out that Wolfe exhibited signs of narcissistic personality disorder, arrogance, lack of empathy, obsession with power, and a desperate desire for admiration at all costs. Shortly after, the courtroom fell silent as audio recordings were played in which Wolfe described Frank as a dead weight during a private meeting. In an email to a business partner, he wrote, "When it's all mine, we can scale up without any barriers." He wasn't talking about the show, he was talking about Frank. The prosecution built their case around the notion of murder as a cold, calculated decision, the final move in a series of actions designed to eliminate anything standing in Mike's way, enabling him to fully control his empire. Mike Wolfe's smile once, a hallmark that made people feel comfortable and easily accept his deals, was now gone. In its place was a man exposed with his scheming thoughts and ruthless ambitions brought to light. Detectives followed the trail and discovered that Wolfe had filed legal documents to take control of the sales of Frank's images and signatures less than 3 weeks after Frank's death. During this time, his lawyer also requested a change in ownership of antique archaeology, completely removing Frank's silent stake. The autopsy revealed a needle-like stab wound on Frank's thigh, concealed by clothing, making it difficult to detect. The location of the wound couldn't be explained if Frank had been self-administering drugs, especially considering his physical limitations following a stroke. The fentanyl level found in Frank's body confirmed that this was a deliberate act leading to his death. As Wolfe sat in court to present evidence, everything stacked up: video footage from the truck, digital data, financial motives, witness testimonies, medical findings, and most importantly, Wolfe's silence in response to the question. He refused to answer. No defense, no angry reaction, no resistance. Just silence. The same silence he had maintained since Frank's death. The formal charges were then read aloud: 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of obstruction of justice, and 1 count of digital identity theft of a deceased person. Wolfe's bail was denied. In his first statement through his lawyer, Wolfe maintained his innocence. "These charges are completely false." The statement read, Mr. Wolfe loved Frank like a brother, and he is deeply saddened by Frank's death. He is fully cooperating with the investigation. We believe that once all the details are cleared up, the truth will prevail. During the trial, the jury learned that in the final year before Frank's death, Wolfe had begun preparing to take full control of the American Pickers brand. He had restructured the company's renegotiated contracts with the History Channel, removed Frank's name and made arrangements to gain priority control over sales and distribution in case Frank was absent. Wolfe's legal team argued that these were normal business decisions after Frank's health issues and his departure from the show. In an email sent to a partner just 6 weeks before Frank's stroke, Wolfe wrote, "Once this issue is resolved, we'll be able to scale without interference, without being stopped." Another email sent to the jury revealed Wolfe's plan to launch an independent brand under his name intended just 3 weeks after Frank's death. Then came the details about the timeline. Wolfe's black Mercedes was parked near Frank's house from 1:36 a.m. to 1:46 a.m., 10 minutes that prosecutors argued Wolfe used to inject fentanyl into Frank. Finally, there was the emotional and human aspect, the core element of the prosecution's case. They called Frank Fritz, Frank's sister, to testify. She spoke gently but firmly. Frank had deteriorated when he had to leave the show, she said. Not only physically, but mentally. He felt betrayed. He told me Mike doesn't care, he just wants me gone. Next, the defense presented a handwritten letter found on Frank's desk in which Frank wrote, "I know he's coming for me. If anything happens, it's not an accident." The court was clearly shocked. However, it was the next witness who delivered the biggest shock to the prosecution. Elaine Temple, Frank's neighbor. She took the stand and said, "I woke up that night, couldn't sleep. I looked out the window and saw the truck. I recognized it from TV. I saw someone get out and walk to the back door of Frank's house. He didn't knock, just stood there for a while, then walked around to the back. When shown a lineup photo, Elaine pointed to Mike Wolfe and said, 'I think it was him.' She said, 'I can't be sure, but it looked very much like him. The walk, the posture, everything.' The defense tried to counter this testimony, but the damage was done. A chilling picture was being slowly painted. The most emotional moment in the trial came when Mike Wolfe stepped up to the witness stand. Although his lawyer argued that this decision was a risky gamble, Mike remained determined to speak up. He walked slowly towards the witness chair, the image of a confident TV host beloved by the American public. His voice was initially choked with emotion, but gradually he regained his composure. "We were like brothers," Mike said. "We built something together, but everything got complicated. Fame changes everything. Money can change people. Maybe I didn't handle it well, but I never wanted to hurt Frank." He explained the messages on his phone. "That was when I was frustrated," I vented. "The job really stressed me out. I said things I regret, but none of it meant I wanted to hurt him. I miss him every day. We have issues, but I would never do anything to hurt him. I couldn't live with myself if I did." However, his words weren't enough to convince the jury. The evidence against Mike Wolfe was too clear to dismiss. After weeks of trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew suffocating, as if time had stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned towards the defendant, Mike Wolfe, who had once become a familiar face on television screens, now standing there motionless like a stone statue. The cold light of the courtroom shone on his tired, emotionless face. When the judge's calm but authoritative voice broke the thick silence, every word was like a hammer. "In this court, the defendant Michael Wolfe is found guilty." The courtroom was filled with a collective gasp of surprise, like a cold wave running down the spines of those present. All eyes were on Mike Wolfe, waiting for a reaction, a sign of remorse or anger. But he stood there, his eyes blank, staring straight ahead without blinking. Then a moment stretched out, seemingly endless, as he slowly blinked as though struggling with an unbearable truth. Immediately after, he slowly collapsed, unable to control his legs, causing his large frame to gently fall to the floor. Before anyone could react, before the first scream could be heard, Mike Wolfe collapsed to the courtroom floor. A distinct thud echoed in the stillness, like a final sentence being pronounced. He lay there motionless, his arms stretched out face down on the cold stone floor, his silver hair falling over his face. In that first moment, everyone was stunned, as if time had stopped. Then chaos erupted. Chairs were pushed aside, hurried footsteps, frantic shouts. The court's medical staff, always ready for emergencies, rushed to Mike Wolfe's side. They knelt down urgently, performing chest compressions, trying to revive any last hope. An oxygen mask was hurriedly placed on his pale face, but every effort seemed in vain. Whispers of concern spread among the medical staff. "Where's the pulse? What's the blood pressure? Call an ambulance." But amid the chaos, a cruel truth gradually became apparent. The man who had once been a symbol of discovery, resurrecting forgotten items, the one who built a television empire from old trinkets, now became a tragic symbol of the blindness of ambition and ruthless actions. Mike Wolfe had passed away right there in the courtroom immediately after hearing his sentence. News of Mike Wolfe's sudden and dramatic death quickly spread, leaving the world in shock. How could a story that seemed like tabloid fodder end in such a tragedy? This question echoed in the minds of millions who had followed his journey on the show. American pickers, now forced to face a shocking and haunting conclusion. Mike Wolfe's fall was not just the downfall of a man, but the end of an era. A cautionary tale of the price to be paid when fame and power begin to manipulate people. The Frank Fritz case shattered the public's trust worldwide, as the perpetrator turned out to be Mike Wolfe, the close friend. The shockwave spread everywhere. But the most painful climax occurred right in the courtroom, when Mike Wolfe suddenly passed away, leaving behind a big question mark about the secrets yet to be revealed. But had the story truly ended? Behind the courtroom doors were there still hidden details waiting to be uncovered? To not miss any new developments, and to explore the unknown aspects of the Frank Fritz case, be sure to hit the like button on this video and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes the truth can be even more shocking than we ever imagined.